Okay, hello, and welcome back to Dwarf Fortress, Ledusen, Rackhelped, our fortress which I think has been going on for about 4 or 5 years in-game now. Since last time, we managed to hit 200 out of our population total. Actually we went a bit above that because I keep accepting the petitions people have to join our fortress for the glory of killing monsters, which they're doing alright at. They're supplying us with Dwarf. So we're getting meat from that. What else? Started creating more of the equipment for our military. We got the farms working. And a few other things. I think, I was building more space for live production and all that. However, in the meantime, I've actually done some reading up about Dwarf Fortress 44.12 because, as I might have mentioned earlier on, while I have played a lot of Dwarf Fortress, I had played 44.12 briefly when it came out, but not to any great extent. Certainly not to the extent I am now, and so some of the other changes which have been made passed me by. In particular, this is the whole stress situation, which I did have mentioned to me last time, and maybe a few other times in the past streams. Though the exact extent to it, of the whole stress system and dealing with it and all that passed me by a bit. I think because I still assumed that dwarves reacted more or less how they used to, which is they would get unhappy thoughts, but that would be balanced off by having a good meal, having a good drink, having a nice surroundings. And for the most part, in previous Dwarf Fortress versions, it was extremely easy to keep your dwarves happy. I believe this changed in 44.10, when the stress system was introduced. Now the dwarves have... I feel, from my reading, I believe these are kind of two different things. They have a happiness, and then they have a stress level. And I've been noticing this in at least 1 or 2 of my dwarves. Not to a great extent, but apparently it can get quite bad. I'm getting ahead of myself a bit there. Stress is caused by dwarves not being able to perform certain actions, or having situations which make them unhappy, and... Unhappy? Things like seeing corpses, things like not being able to pray, things like not eating food which they enjoy, or food which they have a particular taste for, like... I believe one of our named characters, might be Tidy, prefers eating green tree frog. And so, if they have a meal of that, they'll get a happy thought of that. For the unlikely situation where I actually end up with green tree frog. There's other things like talking to people, talking to their family, having a baby, becoming a parent, being next to really good furniture is still a thing, apparently. I'm looking on the wiki at the moment. Apparently there's ones for giving people food, being yelled at, cried on by an unhappy citizen is a positive if they have empathy. And it just goes through a whole list of all these different things which they can do, as well as which can give them negative thoughts. From what I've been reading, some of the negative thoughts which people can get, the primary ones are the dwarf getting rained on, which will give them small, like, annoyed statuses, but it's like a constant annoyance over time. Things like being unhappy seeing dead bodies, especially if they're civilians, Other things like being caught in miasma, of course, they can get negative effects by that. Being in combat is also something which doesn't necessarily mean they have to be fighting in combat. It means more they have to be interrupted by combat. So, say a dwarf is out fishing, and then a alligator comes nearby, and the dwarf is like, "Oh, that's going to attack me," and they run off. That counts as being in combat, from my reading. Which makes sense in the game's situation, because they entered combat and they fled. Or combat was initiated on them and they fled, rather than fight the alligator. Other things, sleeping without a proper room. In my reading, I found, actually, that dwarves, you should be giving your dwarves generally at least 3x3 or even 4x4 sized rooms, or larger. The old sort of stuff everyone into 2x2 rooms is not really enough anymore. Because they like to have things like a cabinet to store their stuff in, which I kind of knew beforehand, but as I said, you could ignore a lot of this stuff because it was really easy to keep your dwarves happy overall. You know, they might be upset that they have a small room, but at the same time, that was an awesome table in the kitchen. The main issue with stress at the moment seems to be that the dwarves, even though they may get positive thoughts from some of the things which they're performing, they don't actively seek out things which make them happy to offset the stress. And a number of the stress issues, like being rained on, or going outside, or seeing corpses, tend to stack on top of each other. It seems possibly also seeing corpses can give them a whole bunch of different upset about seeing corpses because of the dismemberment that might occur from battle. So it's sort of like, oh, there's a dead goblin. Oh, there's the dead goblin's arm. Oh, there's the dead goblin's hand. Oh, there's the dead goblin's 5 fingers. Individually, each one of those would give them an upset status. I think as sort of saying, from my reading, people aren't exactly sure how the whole stress system is working, which is fine in a way, because it's like, you know, it gives people time to discuss things over and collaborate on individual opinions and experiences in the game, and they come to a conclusion, which is something which the community around Dwarf Fortress has done a fair number of times over the years. They could also, I believe they could look up the game code and all that. Maybe, or at least to a degree. I think they could see some of it, maybe not all of it. But they can sort of guess at some of the modifiers being used and all that. But it does seem overall that there is an opinion that the stress situation is bugged in a manner. Because the dwarves aren't, as I said, the dwarves aren't actively seeking out actions which make them de-stress. And the stress issues keep stacking up. So I'm going to have to be, I think, modifying my fortress a bit to deal with this whole thing. It's not, I haven't been seeing that much of an issue. People have been saying that, I mean, my fortress is still rather young, and apparently this is an issue which builds up over time. I think we started in 125, so 6, 7, 8. We're in our 3rd year. Yeah, mid-autumn of the 3rd year, I believe. So we might just be seeing the beginnings of this whole stress situation. I do have a dwarf which is got stress issues. I believe it might be down here, the one attending a meeting. Amost. I think it was another one as well, maybe. If we have a look at him. B, here we go. Yep. Amos has become haggard and drawn due to tremendous stresses placed on him. Within the last season, he was blissful after sleeping in a good bedroom. He was uneasy after a lack of introspection for too long. He was uneasy after being able to acquire something for too long. This one means that they haven't been able to... there hasn't been items which they've hauled and then claimed as their own to sort of satisfy... I now own something. I think it could be things like bracelets, trinkets, just like little knickknacks and all that, which you might make. He felt uneasy about a lack of decent meals for too long. Now, this is something I've seen quite a few people, even myself, be tripped up on. At base value, it looks like it's saying they're uneasy after a lack of decent meals, which means the meal quality hasn't been good enough. However, apparently it means it's not that the meals are not decent, it means that they haven't eaten a meal which involves an ingredient which they like. If we look down here, when possible, he prefers to consume giant cougar, squid, horse cheese, and single grain wheat beer. So if we make him a meal, or if we have a meal which has one of these ingredients in it, or he just eats one of these, say horse cheese, then that will satisfy this this status, apparently. He felt lonely after being away from family for too long. This one is rather difficult to resolve because dwarves can come to your fortress without any family, and the chances of their family coming to the fortress in a migrant wave, I believe, is just kind of random. I don't know whether if having family in a fortress increases the chance that their family will move there. It can also be satisfied by them getting married and possibly having children in a marriage, but well, I mean that depends. It's more if they get married, because dwarves can have what's it called, same-sex marriages based on their preferences. So whether they have children from that is up to that. He felt lonely after being away from friends for too long. This one can, I believe, from my understanding, is also similar to the families. They might not have any of their friends in the fortress to talk to, but at the same time, they can make new friends in the fortress. They have to talk with the dwarves have to talk with each other, and apparently the situations where the dwarves will actually talk to each other is rather stringent. They have to be next to each other and have one... If we imagine a dwarf surrounded by 8 squares, in the north, south, east, west squares, there has to be a dwarf placed, and they both have to stand there to be able to talk with each other. They can't talk diagonally. However, as soon as one of these north, south, east, west squares is filled by a dwarf, and that dwarf is talking to our original dwarf in the center, the diagonal squares become available for the dwarf in the center to talk to other dwarves. That's at least what I've seen someone figure out. So, in a way, having a large meeting hall or tavern, which I don't have one, is not necessarily beneficial because the dwarves spread out, and even though they're in the same room with each other, they don't actually talk to each other. It seems like they don't seek out each other to talk to, it's more they only talk if they just happen to be next to each other. You can force them to talk with each other. One thing which could be good is to have seating next to each other. I saw a layout for a tavern where they had chairs with the tables next to the wall, and then the chairs, and then after the chairs they had a line of tavern, so people in the tavern would stay in this line, and then you would have another line of chairs after this one line of tavern, so that dwarves eating would occupy the chairs and people from the tavern would be occupying the center line in the room. And that would mean that they'd be close together, so that they'd be talking. Anything else? Well, there's a lot else. Felt lonely after being away from family, felt lonely after being away from friends. He was bored after being able to practice a craft for too long. Now, he's a stonecrafter. I assume in this case it means that all the dwarves kind of like to create things. So I suppose because he's a stonecrafter... I mean, he's a stonecrafter, not a mason. Sorry, I was thinking a mason. So he would want to go and actually create stonecrafts in a shop. But apparently, pretty much every dwarf has this desire to create things. Which means it's also important to swap out your military dwarves. Because they need off time. Because the military takes up all their time, they don't get the time to worship, they don't get the time to visit family, they don't get time to do all these things which they need to do, but they don't actively seek out to do like they do eating and drinking. I can keep my dwarves in the military indefinitely, especially in previous versions, because all their needs were satisfied by eating and drinking, essentially, and when they go to the meeting hall to eat or drink, they would say, oh, this is a great meeting hall, look at all these fantastic tables. I'm satisfied and it's offset my unhappiness at being worked too hard. But all this other stress and feelings on top of that has made it more difficult. So you have to, it seems like you have to swap out your military and give them time off so that they can, like, hopefully do other things. But as I said, they don't actively seek out the de-stressors to do. So, it's in that way people have had issues with it, because even when you're trying to help the dwarves, they don't necessarily help themselves, it seems. I mean, part of this can also just be the dwarves' personality. If they are naturally inclined to be stressful, there's not really that much you can do to help them. Unless you, like, you know, room them away from anything which can make them unhappy. But that is a lot of effort, and I'm not going to go through every single dwarf in my 200 dwarf fortress to figure out which ones are particularly inclined to being stressful. So some of them will just not be able to deal with the stresses of being in a fortress. This leads to another problem. I kind of feel like I'm getting ahead of myself here, but this kind of leads to another problem. Dwarves which become extremely stressed can end up becoming combative. Or rather, they go into a tantrum, and they can attack other dwarves. And this causes more negative stress issues, because, you know, oh, I'm getting attacked, how stressful. Which can lead to, you know, bigger problems for stress, because if someone's stressed and they take it out on someone else, suddenly everyone else is feeling the stress as well, which makes sense. But since you don't really have good ways to deal with it, you know, it sort of ends up, apparently it can end up kind of in a tantrum spiral situation. A tantrum spiral previous versions was pretty much the same. If one dwarf became too unhappy, they would throw a tantrum, and they'd punch a dwarf. But then that dwarf which got punched would become really unhappy, and they'd punch another dwarf, and those dwarves would become unhappy, and so on and so forth. This was conflated by the dwarves all being rather close friends with each other in how the dwarves used to converse with each other, because they'd all end up great friends or even family members. So they'd all be talking amongst each other, and then one dwarf throws a punch, and suddenly that dwarf is upset. That dwarf's friends are upset that that dwarf was attacked. All those dwarves' family members are upset as well, and it compiled from there, because all it took was another one to break, and then everyone got like twice the upsetness, because now there's two dwarves which got punched, and so on. That was a bug, and it did get fixed, but it seems possibly it's kind of back in a little way with this. At least it seems to me, though the causes are different. He was uneasy after being unable to be extravagant for so long. That might be tied to... Actually, what does that one say? I'm not too sure. What was it? He felt... he was uneasy. Uneasy. Being near hated vermin in a cage, being caught in freakish weather, seeing someone's dead body. Giving birth to a baby, well, sure. Being able to pray, lack of decent meals, being kept from alcohol, being unable to be extravagant. It doesn't actually say what that is. If I had to guess, it would mean that they haven't been able to buy anything or obtain anything of value. Or maybe it's because they haven't got a bedroom of sufficient quality. You know, they're like, oh, my room is alright, but it's a hole. I wish it was more extravagant. The vagueness is kind of a big issue with this, I feel. Because it feels like I've done everything right, but then the dwarves are still getting unhappy. It's like, I want to help them, but they're not really helping themselves. I have done everything right for previous versions of Dwarf Fortress. However, this stress situation is something new, and it's fun to figure it out. And it still seems like there's a bit of... the majority are of the opinion there is an issue with this. I am inclined to agree. However, some people are sort of saying they haven't had too much of an issue with it. And maybe that just comes down to how people lay the rooms out. We have got some positive thoughts here. He was blissful after sleeping in a good bedroom, so he's happy about his bedroom. He felt euphoric due to inebriation. That one's probably always going to happen, because as long as you have alcohol, they're going to get drunk. Though apparently, there's another thing which I read about taverns and tavern keepers. We'll might get to that when I build a tavern. Uneasy about being extravagant. He didn't feel anything after a lack of abstract thinking for too long. I believe that might be tied to having a library. Some dwarves like reading and like debating. The library also comes into not just writing or reading, it also encourages the dwarves to debate amongst themselves and like talk about topics. Which can actually be negative for dwarves which don't enjoy that kind of thing. I believe that actually showed up in the most recent edition of Krug's what's it called? Krug Smasher's videos. One of his dwarves ended up being really stressed because she was being forced to involve in conversations and working in the library when she just doesn't like really doing that kind of thing. He didn't feel anything after being unable to practice a martial art for too long. This is also something, apparently dwarves as a whole like to practice military actions, so having them have time for training seems like something which would help them feel better about themselves. Though again, that might actually come down to the individual dwarves. I believe as a whole they feel that martial actions are kind of to be obtained, but some of them might be more peaceful, so he was exhilarated remembering getting into an argument. This would be a specific one based on the dwarf's personality. For some dwarves, getting into an argument would be a negative. However, for this dwarf, he really liked getting into an argument. Is it down in his personality here? He personally feels that introspection and all forms of self-examination are the key to a good life and worthy of respect, views tranquility as one of the highest ideals, due to seeing as admired Helms die in 127. This is where, like, his personality changed because of a traumatic event. Finds the pursuit of knowledge to be a waste of effort, and doesn't really see the point of working hard. No, that's not about argumentative. He has a very bad sense of empathy. That might build into it. Because he's like, oh, I had an argument and I made someone else upset. Oh, he never becomes angry, so that might also work into it. He becomes completely helpless in stressful situations. He is unfriendly and disagreeable, and he is bothered by this since he values friendship. So he's got a bit of a conflicting personality there. He likes arguing, but that tends to push people away from him, so he's not likely to make friends. He does not have a great aesthetic sensitivity, and he is conflicted by this as he values artwork and its creation. He has a noticeable lack of perseverance. He likes a little excitement now and then, a turnaround after seeing As Admired Helm die in 127. Hello, welcome. We're examining the stress situation for dwarves. So where were we? He was exhilarated after getting into an argument, felt euphoric due to inebriation. That's because he drank alcohol, that's fine. He didn't feel anything after seeing a Kia's dead body. He didn't feel anything after seeing a helmet snake's dead body. He didn't feel anything after seeing a Dwarf's dead body. I believe dwarves will initially, I believe this is still a thing. Dwarves will be upset about seeing bodies, regardless of what they are, for a while, but then they'll get used to it over time, I think. However, I believe dead dwarves or dead sentient creatures will still give them larger negatives. He didn't feel anything while in conflict. He didn't feel anything after seeing a helmet snake's dead body. He was uneasy after seeing Medtob Sparktool's dead body. That might have been a goblin, which I have on display. So displaying corpses like that might actually not be a good thing. If you're watching my Dungeon Keeper 2 playthrough, it's been pretty fun watching it. Oh, well, I'm glad you're enjoying it. I have done quite a few past streams, and if you wish to view them, they are all up on my YouTube channel, which is linked on my Twitch homepage. Or you can just search Mech Ash4 on YouTube. I have a playthrough of Dungeon Keeper Gold as well. He was uneasy after seeing As Admired Helm's dead body. That's that dwarf civilian which is out in our refuse pile. That's also something. Because dwarves get such a negative opinion after seeing dead bodies, most people seem to actually spend their time hiding the bodies away behind walls and having a specific squad of corpse gatherers to deal with the dead, so that other dwarves don't have to actually put up with having to carry them around and seeing dead bodies. So, am I from Australia? Yes, I am. How can you tell? Is it my accent? Or maybe it's because yeah, whatever. He didn't feel anything after seeing a cave crocodile's dead body. I mean, this is good to see. It means like he's not getting upset about seeing bodies. I don't have an Australian accent, to be honest. Well, no, I don't have the, I don't have the, stereotypical Ocker accent, but I can't even really do it. Well, thank you. Yes, my, streams usually start around 11:30 PM AEST. Yes, I do have that on my page. Someone read it. What kind of accent was that? I don't know. As I said, I can't do the Australian accent. My brother does a better job of it, but anyway. Seeing a cave crocodile's dead body, he was uneasy after seeing a troll's dead body. I believe possibly odd because AEST means Oz, but starting 11:30 is what? Well, I actually started at 11 or 11:20 now at the moment. I'm trying to put it a bit earlier, but it's sort of convenient for me because. But yeah, AEST, Australian Eastern Standard Time. So, he didn't feel anything after seeing a giant cave toad dead body. There's just a lot of seeing dead bodies here, which is also, as I mentioned earlier, it is kind of the problem because they're like, oh, I saw a dead body. Oh, I saw another dead body. Oh, I saw another dead body. Oh, all these dead bodies. And it just keeps building because I get an individual entry for each of them. It just feels also that he's just being uneasy around it, but it's apparently stacking up to the point where he's become haggard and drawn due to stresses. But being uneasy about them just seems like it's not that big of a deal. Maybe it was traumatized by it then. But then it maybe like each of these uneasies actually builds up to being traumatized. But that was the problem with like the rain, because it's like, oh, I was rained on, oh, I was rained on, oh, I was rained on, or you know, it's just a recurring being rained on, and it just builds up to being stressed. It's hard to say. I don't think any one thing is causing them to get stressed, but it's just like the build up of things. Yeah, body. He felt wait, what's this? He felt satisfied at work. So that's actually different. It says he felt satisfied at work, but then he was uneasy. He was bored after being unable to practice a craft for too long. So he's been doing work, but I suppose he's not been creating things. He felt restless, dwelling upon and seeing as admired helms die. I don't think there's much we can do to help with that. We can't really take his mind off it. It's up to the dwarf to potentially move past it, or whether they dwell on it. So, he was exhilarated after getting into an argument. So that might be tied to remembering getting into an argument. He felt satisfied while crying on somebody in charge. I might have mentioned last time, dwarves will go to your mare, or what's it called? Or your like, oh, what do they call it from the beginning? You know, like the lead dwarf. They'll go to them if they have grievances, and they'll be like, I can't stand how things are going. And depending on their personality, they may throw a temper at the mayor, and sort of say, you know, what the hell's going on? I'm upset. Why is this all like this? Blah, blah, blah. And the mayor's just like, yes, I understand the situation. And they try to placate them. And they'll be like, well, I've said my bit. I feel better now. Or in this case, he went crying to the mayor, and hopefully the mayor did a pretty good job of making him feel better. The mayor has what are they called? Traits, which are, or skills, which are based on this. I think it's, is it placation? And, empathy or something like that? Let me see. What did he feel? He felt satisfied. Satisfied, here we go. Apparently they can feel satisfied slaughtering an animal. There's a lot of realizing the nuances of things, but I don't think it doesn't actually say, like, crying on someone's shoulder. Anyway. What else? He felt euphoric due to inebriation. He felt satisfied remembering crying on somebody in charge. He didn't feel anything after seeing Akia's dead body. He felt satisfied crying on somebody in charge. Did I just read that? No, it's repeating it. He felt euphoric due to inebriation. He was annoyed after having a drink without using a goblet, cup, or mug. We do have sufficient cups or mugs, I believe. So this is another one where it's sort of like, maybe he went to get a drink and there wasn't a mug for him to grab, so he just went for a drink without a mug, even though there was sufficient mugs. So it's just like, oh, I don't have a mug, I'm upset. He was interested after watching a performance. This would be down, I believe, in the temples. Some of the dwarves can play instruments or dance, and dwarves, if they're good, will have good thoughts from it. If you have a bad dancer or so on, they'll actually get... I think they can get negative thoughts from it, because they're like, oh, that was pretty terrible. I think also you can have dwarves which are, like, embarrassed if they watch someone performing. So that may be depending on the bawdiness of the performance. He felt interested near a fine container, so he's getting happy thoughts from some of our quality items. Felt satisfied while crying on somebody. Felt euphoric He was annoyed dwelling upon drinking water without a well. Now, again, that's something which is up to the dwarf, because we have got a well, and there's no reason why he wouldn't be able to drink from it. Maybe we need more because the well might have been busy at the time, but we have enough drinks. Why is he drinking water? He was just near the river when he got thirsty, so he decided to drink from the river. I can't really control that. Also, he was dwelling upon it, so it might have happened a while ago. And something else some people have said is that the dwarves maybe don't drop old issues easily. Like, they'll keep remembering being caught in the rain for years. He didn't feel anything after seeing a Dwarf's dead body. He was accepting remembering being caught in the rain. That's actually rather good. It's just like, oh, I got caught in the rain. Oh, that happens. Other dwarves will be like, they got annoyed getting caught in the rain, and it's just... he didn't feel anything after seeing a Jaguar's dead body. Okay, so we got through all that, but I wanted to... That's not all the things, that's just specific for this dwarf. And I wanted to explain, at least from my understanding, the reasons for his stress. At least as I can guess it. Overall, Amos is unfocused by unmet needs. I suppose it's all these things, but again, it's like... I suppose I can't really control a lot of the needs. It's up to the dwarf to do them. I can help the situation, but... Hello, welcome. Can we have a look at another one of our dwarves? Because I think we've got one which is worse off than that dwarf. The mayor is conducting a meeting. That was how I picked that dwarf out, because they were conducting a meeting. I think our other dwarf was like... His name was like AA or something. We should be able to see it actually. Oh, there's one. Uzol. Over the long term, Uzol has been under a great deal of stress. He was annoyed dwelling upon having a drink without a goblet. He felt fondness remembering making a friend. He was dejected about lack of decent meals for too long. But that's not the fact that my meals are terrible, but a lot of them are just raw fruit and all that. That's more, I believe, it's because he hasn't eaten things which he likes. So he prefers to consume garden cress and raspberry wine. Well, I don't have raspberry wine because I don't have raspberries, and garden cress, I don't think I have any of that either, so I can't do anything about that. I can maybe order some, but for one dwarf, he was dejected after being unable to be extravagant for so long, sure. He felt self-pity after no abstract thinking, felt satisfied at work. He was horrified after seeing a troll's dead body. He was horrified after seeing the goblin Statos Blackrain's dead body. So this dwarf is actually saying, oh god, dead bodies! Even a gremlin's dead body he was upset about seeing. And he was horrified reliving seeing the goblin's dead body. So, moving the bodies away from their viewing would help the situation a fair amount for a number of the dwarves, and sticking them up on pedestals, while something which you could do in earlier games, in earlier versions, doesn't really seem like it's something you could do too much of now. There's another dwarf down there. Can we have a look at him? Is that Stonecrafter? That's the Stonecrafter. Yes. So we've had a look at him. You can tell the stressed dwarves because they have this red down arrow around them, or a yellow down arrow, depending. Red is worse than yellow. I believe we have one which is actually severely depressed and is like melancholic, but I don't know where they are unless they threw themselves in the river. There's another one, soap maker, under a great deal of stress. He felt what's this long one here? Felt pleasure remembering a fine seat. He was uneasy dwelling upon becoming a parent. Okay, that's interesting. And mulling over the recurring memory allowed him to rethink his intellectual values and change his personal tendencies. He personally would have the world operate in complete harmony without the least bit of strife or disorder due to becoming a parent in 127. Oh, so I suppose that's maybe he gained more empathy because he has a child now. Has great respect for fairness, finds leisure time wasteful, disregards tradition, values nature, a turnaround after being caught in the rain, and does not really value skills related to fighting. Does he still want to learn how to fight though? I'm gonna have to check through this massive blob. This is a kind of a problem as well. Just this massive wall of text is kind of like a brick wall to try and read something specific in it. He was bored after a lag, he was horrified after seeing it, he was uneasy about being unable to acquire something. Thinking homeless snakes, he sort of gremlins, satisfied remembering work. He felt loathing dwelling upon being out in the sunshine again. I believe that might be because he's been cave adapted. So he's like, oh, the sun, I hate it. Annoyed dwelling upon having a drink without using a goblet, cup, or mug, but we have those. He doesn't feel anything after seeing a cave crocodile's dead body. So that's fine. Or seeing a giant rat's dead body. He was... yeah. I'm not really seeing anything here. He didn't feel anything after getting into an argument. So, okay. Oh, hello. Welcome. I'm spending a bit of time going through our stressed dwarves because I've been spending the day reading up on how stress affects them and the problems people have had with it. Because it's a rather large change since I last played Dwarf Fortress, or that I'm having to sort of realize the scope of. Do we have that stressed dwarf around here somewhere? I forget what the... Actually, can we have a look at the log? It might be in the log that he, stumbling around obliviously. Well, that's the Stonecrafter. Mark's dwarf has been found dead. Oh, that's one of the... what's it called? And that's our log. Okay. Because we've just started the game. But these interrupted by Kias and all that, apparently they can also be a bit of a problem, because it's stopping them from doing things. Waterfall, fountain, mist shower is always nice for that. Yes, I have seen... That's sort of been the long thing people have always done to help dwarves feel happy. Having a mist generator, because having mist around the place gives dwarves happy thoughts, because they're like, ah, mist, so nice. So you have like a waterfall going through your fortress and pouring through a grate in the floor so that it doesn't accumulate water everywhere, and the dwarves are just like, ah, lovely mist. Apparently also smoothing your fortress out helps. So that's something I have to do. As I mentioned, also larger bedrooms. I'm gonna have to create an actual significant bedroom area. As well as a meeting hall tavern area. It's going to be fiddling around with things to try and figure this out. I might also have to do something like setting up a proper kitchen area, because overall I would like my dwarves to eat prepared meals rather than the raw ingredients. So if I separate the piles of raw food away from the prepared food, then my dwarves would be able to eat the prepared food. Maybe I could put the raw food behind doors which are only accessible by cooks. That way the dwarves wouldn't try to make off with the raw ingredients. That's kind of a problem. Even if I have a stockpile of raw ingredients, the dwarves are just going to go to it and get meals of it because that's what's closest. I did see someone say it's an easier way to satisfy a dwarf's desire for a meal with their favorite ingredient is to not focus on the food, but to focus on the alcohol, because there's less types of alcohol. So if you have alcohol next to the kitchen of a variety, then the chef will use the different alcohols you have in the preparation of a meal. And the dwarves will be like, you know, well, this, you know, plum helmet biscuit may not be my favorite food. However, it does have, like, dwarven ale in its preparation, and I really like dwarven ale. Or it has, like, whip vine wine or something like that, and I'll be like, I really like that. Or turn all the food into lavish meals. That's one of the things which I actually mentioned. If we go back to a dwarf, we'll see this dwarf here. She'll probably have the feeling... what does she like eating? She prefers to consume giant elephant seal, bloated tubers, bumblebee mead, and cranberries. Well, I don't believe we have any of those. So she probably has the feeling of not being able to eat a decent meal. Again, it's kind of a problem. I have to search through the entire thing. Let's have a look for someone else. You. Planter. He was bored. No, he was uneasy about being able to acquire something. He was uneasy after a lack of decent meals for too long. Apparently, this does not mean make a whole bunch of lavish meals or have a really skilled cook. Rather, this means I want food which has my favorite ingredients, which for this dwarf is termite, spotted ratfish, and wine. Now, what I was saying before is getting termites, forget that. Spotted ratfish, you'd have to go to like the ocean or something. Wine, now that's much easier. If it's particularly grape wine, that's possible. Because there is plump helmet wine. I don't know whether it's a generic wine grouping or whether it's specific that grape wine is just called wine. But that's a much easier thing to fulfill because we just need some grapes. And I believe we could grow those. We could trade them from the elves or something. And so if we made biscuits with wine in the process, then he'd be like, oh, these are wine biscuits. As bizarre as that is. And that will satisfy his desire for a decent meal. And it's got a high chance of satisfying a whole bunch of dwarves because there's less alcohols in the game than there are foods. I mean, sometimes I want things like prepared fly brains, and you're like, oh, they'll want fly brains, and you're like, I'm not gonna do that. I can't do that. I think they can. Let's have a look. What do you like? He prefers to consume barley wine. Okay, well, he only likes that one thing. What about you here? He prefers to consume herring, bat ray, potato plants, and sweet potato wine. So, if we have potatoes, or herring, then, you know, that'd be fine. Bat ray? Is that like a fish, I think? Sounds like a fish. And sweet potato wine, so... Can you make, like, vodka with sweet potatoes? Don't see why not. Humans are so ingenious in the brewing of, like, alcohol from basically anything. He prefers to consume char and pendant amaranth beer. Okay. He absolutely detests mussels. Well, I hope you don't detest eating mussels and you just rather detest looking at them, because that's what we've been eating for a long time. Does he actually have a thought about that? I can't be bothered checking through all that. He's actually got quite a few satisfied, euphoric, and blissful opinions. Has apparently a very good bedroom. He was delighted remembering putting on an exceptional item. That might be one of the armor pieces he's wearing. Clothing is another thing. Dwarves will get unhappy thoughts because their clothing is rotting off their bodies. That's something else I was having to do. I was looking up, setting up a clothing industry. And so we'll have to get a lot of pigtail growing and prepare from that. Are you anyone in particular? You got no job. I feel so good! Okay, you're fine. Well, we'll just have to sort of see how things go, I suppose. Actually, no, I can't do that. We're gonna have to build a larger... like a larger... living area. So... okay, let's get this done then. Let me see. Where's our main stairwell? It's over here, isn't it? Yes. We've got 2, and then it goes down to here. And then I've got 1 which goes down, because this was just the tunnel I made to go down to deeper layers. So, how am I going to do this? Corridors are at least 3 wide, maybe even 5 wide, just so that dwarves can fit down them. If we do this, and then we do like... like this. And we can have a double door here. And this can be a grand staircase. Like this. You can do ramp staircases. I've done spiral staircases before. They're kind of a large hassle. Because you have to change it every floor. But it means there's more space for dwarves to go up and down. And it's easier in a square room, actually. But getting it looking good is... because you want to have a large open shaft and just a staircase going down, but... doing it like this is fine. So we do that. Just go down a bunch of levels. We could do upstairs like this. And get rid of that. And then... we'll have the bedrooms here. And this is going to be... yep. Where did I have the bedrooms? Oh, whatever, here. Like that. Then we have like this, and then we have the 5x5 off here. Now, we have 200 dwarves. That is a lot of dwarves. So we're gonna need a lot of bedrooms. But not as many as you'd think, because a lot of the dwarves are married. So we'll start here. And we're just sort of gonna have to create like a large, like, living quarter. Like this, perhaps? With like 3x3 corridors. So let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then we can have another 3x3 corridor. Like that. I'm more or less just doing this randomly, but... we can go down a bit. Like that. Or should I do it so that there's another one in the corner there? Yeah, let's do that. There. Okay. then... Nope, that's too small. They're not gonna line up perfectly. It's probably gonna bug people. I don't really care, but... Wait, what? No. Oh, we can have a double thick wall there. To move this back over to there. Like that. I mean, I've seen neat layouts of bedrooms. Oh, hello. What's wrong? Oh, we had a disconnect. Damn it. The first time that's happened in a while. Oh, that's annoying. Why is my internet being spotty right now? That hasn't been a thing for a while. Okay, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're gonna need more miners for this. Otherwise it's just gonna take forever. Okay, then come on. Oh. What is this? Hold on a moment. The internet dropped out. Apparently it has. Well, that's fun. Don't know what I'm going to do in this situation. The last time, it actually took a while for it to come back. Oh, it's annoying. Just going to keep trying.